Okay, we are live on YouTube. There we are. And Alex is making his dramatic entrance. And we'll start the webinar on Zoom. Okay, so everybody can start piling in now. YouTube and Zoom. And just while folks are coming in, I'll do this part first. So you'll see the Owl City Cycle stuff behind me, because that's where I'm doing the webinar from, because the Owl Center does not have a place where we can do it. And they have all kinds of cool owl gear. So t-shirts, bike jerseys, mugs, water bottles, decals. And the coolest thing, a water bottle holder for your bike. It's metal even, looks like an owl. They've got black ones too. Totally cool. And because one of the things we do at the International Owl Centers, we do our International Festival of Owls. And as part of that, we have a kids owl art contest. So we get thousands of entries every year from all over the world. So what we do, because we can't hang on to all of them, is we give them to good homes as much as we can, and we keep some in our permanent collection. But some that are relevant go to other places. So the coffee shop in town has all the owls with coffee in them on display. We had one with an owl with a bike. So that's on display over here. That was from Sri Lanka. So we've got owl stuff pervasive all through town. And if anybody's interested in the stuff, they have a website, but they don't have an online store. But if you email sales@owlcitycycles.net, he can take a Venmo payment and ship to anybody if they're interested in it. Or visit us in Houston. They're closed in the winter, open during the summer. So that's why we're able to do the webinars now, is because they're not open. Joe, did you want to do, well, Andy, do you want to do your awesome short-eared owl hoots?
Yeah, sure. It's a very simple, short-eared owl has one of the most simple calls. The male advertisement call is pretty straightforward. It's just a whoop, 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 series of hoots. And that's pretty much it. He does this as part of his elaborate courtship display with a very loud wing clap that hopefully we'll have a video of.
But we do. Don't spoil it. Don't
okay.
Spoil it. Yeah. And you'll see that's very, very good. His impression, it's spot on here. At least for the North American birds.
Did you have any other ones you could do, Andy or Alex?
Yeah, let
I
Joe
sure don't.
work. Yeah.
Alex, you've got to work on this now.
I do. The past 2 weeks I've let you down.
Joe?
So the bark, is this mostly a female thing, or is it?
Yeah.
So kind of a
Nice.
Any others? So that's what you got, Joe? That's better than what I've got.
Pretty simple.
We don't really have short ears around here much, so I don't really get a chance to listen to the sounds.
Right. You just have to drive around with owl sounds playing in your car all the time and absorb them and spew them back out again.
Do that with regular bird sounds anyway.
Yeah. I have a very fun story about that. I did do that. So when Cornell put out their Voices of North American Owl CD, like what, in 2005, a zillion years ago, I put it, I must have had a CD playing in my car, or did I take, anyway, my phone is probably half owl calls between the Voices of North American Owl CD, which they don't put out anymore, and Undiscovered Owls. They have 4 CDs, mostly European species. It must have been that one. And my friend Marianne Sabelsberg was here visiting. So we're driving around playing owl calls, and I have to run into the post office. So I leave Mariana out in the car. And the fish owls have such low voices. I had to like actually adjust the bass on my car so we could even hear them. So the car is running outside. I go into the brick post office and I could hear the fish owl call in the post office because it was so low and it carried so well. It's not like I had it cranked, but the low sounds just carry so much. So, you know, I do drive around with owl calls playing in the car. Okay. But you're here to learn about short-eared owls today, and very fun. We have people from 24 countries registered for this webinar today, which is the most countries we've ever had register for a single webinar, and 43 states and 1 territory. We have Puerto Rico registered also. So very diverse audience, probably because short-eared owls are all over the planet, right? And a little bit about the Owl Center. If you haven't watched any of our webinars before, we're located in Southeast Minnesota, way down in the toe next to Wisconsin and Iowa, in the sprawling metropolis of Houston, which is less than 1,000 people. So kind of an odd location. We just sort of evolved here. We currently operate out of an old brick department store, small town department store, which is fine for getting started, not ideal. 1 acoustic space, there's no place we can do webinars. So we kind of do them in different locations, and I'm across the street at Owl City Cycles, hence the owl gear behind me, a bike owl gear. So we kind of make do with what we can. We're in a capital campaign to build what we should have. We own 4 acres in a park on the edge of town where we'll be building an appropriate facility where we'll actually have a studio for doing this kind of stuff. So in the meantime, we make do. So thank you everybody who has joined us to learn more about owls. That's the whole point, is sharing this information with as many people as possible. That's why we try and keep it free. So thanks to everybody who made a donation when they signed up to cover the costs for our staff time and webinar licenses so that we can keep this free so everyone is able to learn. Super thank you to Andy and Alex for doing this a second week in a row, sharing their time and information with us, because you really don't hear much about short-eared owls. So this is fantastic to learn more about. And thanks over in YouTube to our chat room moderators and Tristan, who I think goes by Owly Keep over there, from the Scottish Owl Center. He joins in to help us out also. They'll be helping moderate stuff over there and forwarding questions to us over here in Zoom. So logistically, if you're watching us in June, can I talk? If you're watching in Zoom, we will have the chat turned off, but we'll have the Q&A there so that you can type your questions in there and we'll take questions at the end. If you are watching in YouTube, keep the chat on topic because the chat will always be on. And our mods will help you with some things over there. And if you have questions, type them into the chat and our mods will get them over into Zoom so we can get the questions asked of Andy and Alex. We will have up to 1 hour for questions at the end. So basically this is an up to 2-hour time block for the presentation and questions. If we don't get to them all, then we don't get to them all. If we do, great, but we will cut it off at the 2-hour mark when we're done. This presentation will be saved to YouTube for later viewing. So if you can't stay for it all, or if you have friends that really need to see this later, you can find that link on the Owl Center's website on the Virtual Owl Expert Speaker Series page, or if you go into YouTube, the Owl Center's YouTube page has a playlist for the Virtual Owl Expert Speaker Series that has all of the recorded presentations on it. If you didn't join us last week, a little bit about Andy and Alex. Andy has been around a little longer than Alex has. So Andy, they're both with the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership. Andy started banding birds when he was only 16 years old, so he's been doing it a while. Started working with barn owls back in the 90s and just got into short-eared owls around 3 years ago or so. And he's a retired senior naturalist from Calvert County Natural Resources Division. And Alex kind of got sucked into things with Andy a few years ago. And Alex has worked with Soras and Osprey and still works with Osprey, and then got sucked into all the cool owl stuff. So without further ado, we will turn it over to Andy and Alex. Thank you.
All right. How does it look? Good. Wonderful. So this talk is titled Where the Owls Go, Methods and Insights from Short-Eared Owl Research in Maryland. And I've never done this before, but I actually want to start the talk by changing the title to set expectations and set the stage. And when I sat down to put this talk together, I remember I was sitting here and I'm staring at the title slide. And I remember thinking, what in the world was I thinking when I gave Carla this title? So I went back and I looked at the original email that I sent her with the talk title and the description. And it pretty quickly made sense when I noticed that I sent that email at 2:27 a.m. I was actually sitting in Andy's minivan. We were parked out in the middle of the marsh at Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge. We were actually in the middle of our short-eared owl field work, very appropriately so. So this is obviously was a slightly delusionally sleep-deprived title that I came up with, which honestly feels pretty appropriate for a talk about owls from owl people for owl people, right? So we'll start by taking that first part away there, right there, because this isn't really a talk about where the owls go, but rather where the owls have led us since we began this work, just starting in late 2023. And this talk, it's more of a look into the early stages of our journey through the methods and limitations of our short-eared owl work here in Maryland and investigations beyond as well. And through the growing list of questions, those same questions that tend to keep us up at about 2 or 2:27 a.m. to be exact. And by us, of course, I mean Andy, Brown, and myself. So we run the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership's Farmland Raptor program with the help of so many volunteers. Couldn't do it without them. Andy is the manager and I am the coordinator. Andy there, right here on the right. And just to set the locality of our work straight for people, we have some international people here. You can see that Maryland is highlighted there in the red on this map of the United States. We're quite a small state, and that's the region, the state in which the Farmland Raptor program operates. So the Maryland Farmland Raptor program focuses on 4 main species. It's farmland raptors that are identified in the Maryland State Wildlife Action Plan as species of greatest conservation need. And these are the American barn owl, the American kestrel, both of which we discussed in last week's webinar, as well as the northern harrier, and of course, the short-eared owl, which is the species that we will solely be focusing on today, okay? Oceophlameus. And oseo is a classical Latin name, and it refers to a horned or an eared owl. And then phlomeus there, the species name, is it means flame-colored or fiery. So you put them together and you get the short-eared owl, the flame-colored eared owl. But before we really get into short-eared owls, I want to start from the beginning, okay? And for me, the beginning is before short-eared owl even had a name, before humans even came into the picture, or at least before anything we recognize as a modern human, because we're going roughly 2.5 to 3 million years back. And just to anchor that timeline a little bit here, this sits right between when our ancestors looked something like this and this, right between these two here. And in that same window, so this is the late Pliocene, roughly 3 million years ago, in what's now Poland and elsewhere in Europe, we get fossils that are assigned to Oceophlameus, or very closely related forms within that oseo lineage. And to highlight one of my personal favorites from that lineage, if we jump ahead to the late Pleistocene and we go to the Andes of Ecuador, we get to meet Oseo ecuadoriensis. And this is a huge owl. I mean, it probably stood like 2 feet tall, wingspan around 5 feet, these powerful legs to lift itself up off the ground. It was this open country owl, and pellets that were found alongside its bones. It had the remains of small mammals like our oseo owls today, but it also had the remains of other owls. So it appears that this must have been and has been described as a cannibal owl, as you can see right here in this Taito, this barn owl looking thing on this tree branch on the left here. And just like their modern relatives, these ancient oseo owls, they hunted in the open country, like I said. They didn't act like these normal owls. They broke the mold of these typical nocturnal tree-dwelling things that we think of when we think of as an owl, when we think of owls. But for a long time, that doesn't really matter, because to people, owls are just owls. They show up in myth and folklore and ancient art, but we don't really get the first real clear written mention of an Osseo owl until this guy in 77 AD. Pliny the Elder, he uses the term Osseo in his Natural History. You can see here. And to translate this quote, he writes something like, "The Osseo is a nocturnal bird of the owl kind, with ears terrifying in its screech and unlucky to the aboard." And now, that doesn't really sound like a short-eared owl to me, and it's probably not. It's highly debatable. But it is the first time that we see the name Osseo in writing, and this all will make sense why I'm building this up. This really does mark a milestone. But then we jump ahead to the mid-1700s, the Age of Enlightenment, or what I really like, I think is more appropriately called the taxonomic free-for-all. Naturalists, they start racing to name everything that moved. So let me introduce you to this guy first. And we're just going to call him Eric P. because I tried time and time again to pronounce that last name right there. And I'm not convinced that I'm doing it correctly. So Eric P. Was the first to publish a formal scientific description of the short-eared owl in his Danske Atlas. That's what these things are right here, the many volumes, in 1769. And he called it Strix Flammea, which, fine. Except this guy right here, Linnaeus, might look familiar, but he already took that name, and he took it for the barn owl back in 1758. So we've got a name collision going on right out of the gate. The mess is beginning. The name game is kicking off. And we skip ahead to 1771, and this guy Peter Simon Pallas comes along and names it Strix Accipitrina, later revised to Osseo accipitrinus, which, to be fair, is kind of cool, and which is why I bring it up, because it roughly means hawk-like owl, which is probably a nod to its behavior, right? How it kind of like skims low over the open ground and floats like a harrier. But eventually, we get to Osseo flammeus. So this is recycling that original flammeus, that species name from Eric P., and pairing it with Osseo, that ancient Roman word that Pliny the Elder used back in 77 AD. But through the late 1700s and 1800s, this owl, it becomes kind of like a taxonomic ping pong ball, just back and forth. I mean, you've got Strix brachiotis, Otis microcephalus, I believe, Brachiotis palustris, and then one of my personal favorites, Strix otis minor, which really just means junior long-eared owl. And then, following these guys that I've mentioned, the shotguns start to come out. So we enter this age, this golden age of natural history, this colonial specimen collecting just on absolute overdrive, shotgun ornithology. I mean, anything that flaps or moves, it gets bagged and tagged. And, if it looks slightly different, boom, it's getting a Latin name. So by the late 1800s, Osseo flammeus, it's accumulated this whole train of aliases. Some were proposed as species, some as subspecies, some are just alternative genus placements, but they all reflect the same thing. People are naming birds wherever they found them, often based on regional differences. I mean, was it justified? And that's kind of the point here. Sometimes it was, but mostly it was just a big mess. And then something really interesting and actually important happens. The naming boom slows down with all birds, not just short-eared owls. And we enter what I like to call the quiet age of lumping. So relevant to short-eared owls, in 1940, this ornithologist James L. Peters publishes volume 4 of his checklist of birds of the world. And in it, he just merges everything. All the short-eared owl names, all the regional species, they get collapsed into this one Osseo flammeus. There's no major study. It's just this checklist that he puts out, and it's accepted. And to be fair, a lot of these species, these earlier splits, they're based on these really thin differences. I mean, these slight color variations, small size shifts, just, regional areas where they were shot and collected. And people are excited about naming something new. They want to discover. But overnight, thanks to this checklist, short-eared owls around the world become a single species with regional subspecies. And today, Osseo flammeus is considered this cosmopolitan species, really. It's one of the most widely distributed owls on Earth. but it doesn't show up evenly. So we can see here this abundance map from Cornell. It has this patchy distribution. It's closely tied to habitat, like really anything, and prey availability. But there's currently 10 recognized subspecies. Okay, and this is a crude map, but purposefully so. And if everything that I've just walked through and builds up to and trying to build up to here has told you anything, it's that I don't entirely buy this at all. To me, these 10 subspecies, they're still carrying the fingerprints of that early naming boom. And it's just a hypothesis for now. We're working on it. There's many people working on it, but we're revisiting taxonomy. I mean, the revisiting short-eared owl taxonomy is long overdue. And one place to start is museum work, museum specimens. And this is a collaborative project led by Dr. Marie-Sophie Garcia-Arras, who also heads the short-eared owl working group, which we'll get into a little bit later. Andy will introduce that. But maybe most importantly, this project is built on the foundation laid by David Johnson. And David, if you know him, I mean, he's a mentor, not just to Sophie, Andy, and me, but perhaps many of the people in the audience as well. I mean, he's just an absolute legend in the owl world. And you can see here in the green down here, that's Sophie, David, and I at the Natural History Museum. And so far, collectively, Sophie's visited a lot over here in Europe, and she's done these as well. But collectively, we've visited 6 museums so far, and not just in North America here, but also over in Europe. I actually just got back on Friday evening, well, technically Monday morning, because it was after midnight that I arrived home, or Saturday morning, sorry. But from the LSU collections down here in Louisiana, finishing up those specimens. And this project that we're doing, it's building directly on David's protocol. It's originally developed for his work on burrowing owls. If you were here last week, you got to see how Andy really implemented this and adapted the protocol for barn owls as well, in collaboration with a student from Walla Walla, who it was her master. She headed up that project. But this is a morphometrics-based approach. It's designed to bring this real measurable evidence to bear on these taxonomic questions we have, and to support possible splits where warranted. Collectively, so far, we've measured over 1,000, or about 1,000 specimens, representing 10 of the 9 subspecies of short-eared owl. And just to take a look at some of those preliminary results here, you can see we've only had a chance to analyze a fraction of the data set, okay? But even so, we're already seeing some intriguing patterns. So this is just females here. And you can see that the female Galapagos birds, they cluster out morphologically. And I mean, this is going to give me an opportunity to tell you how fascinating I find the Galapagos birds, not just morphometrically, but behaviorally and phenotypically as well. And if we take a look at the Galapagos birds, so these guys here on the left, you can see compared to the nominate Flammeus, so these are the northern birds. So if you're in North America, anywhere in the northern hemisphere, this is the subspecies that you're familiar with. But you can notice that there's this overall, this darker plumage. I mean, they're so dark, and I'll show you a video in just a bit where you can see a live bird moving. But for me, a quick aside is this is where my mind goes. And I mean, it's very relevant, but it goes to Glauber's rule, if you've ever heard of it. Glauber's rule is fascinating. It's the idea that endotherms, especially birds in warm, humid environments, they tend to have a darker plumage. And that's because this pigment, it's thought to provide protection against feather degrading bacteria, amongst other things. And these, bacteria thrives in humid and wet conditions. So, when you see these richer tones in the Galapagos birds, looks like Glauber's rule in action. But to look closely at these upper parts of these specimens as well, you can see kind of the transverse barring here. It almost looks like Osio otis, or the long-eared owl. And it really, emphasizes that they're close cousins and the relationship that they have, not so far off. And every time I see it, my brain just lights up, because none of the other subspecies look like this. It's so cool. And just to throw in a fun fact here, if you weren't aware, there is even a paper that details a hybridization between short-eared and long-eared owl. So you can see short-eared here on the left, long-eared here on the right, and then this bird in the center here is the presumed hybrid. And I'm not suggesting that this is explaining anything with the Galapagos birds, but it's just, again, like a little reminder how interconnected these lineages really are. But anyway, to circle back to the Galapagos birds, that sent me on this little side fact tangent. There's a team working in the Galapagos doing absolutely incredible work on these owls. They know far more about them than I do. But behaviorally, I just want to highlight something that I find incredibly cool. These owls, these Galapagos birds, they're hunting storm petrels. So here's a video of a Galapagos short-eared owl going after a wedge-rump storm petrel. And hopefully it's going to play from where I want it to. And it's not. But there we go. So you can see they're so dark. Behaviorally so different as well, in my opinion. But, morphometrically, behaviorally, like I said, phenotypically as well. There's clearly a lot to be explored here, not just within the Galapagos birds, but short-eared owls, across their range. And something that I find especially exciting with owls, and it's so important with owls because they're so vocal, is something I love, poring over late at night, and Canto or Macaulay or, the audio archives that are publicly available, are of course the vocal differences. And I think this is a pretty wide open frontier when it comes to short-eared owls. As far as I can tell, there's been no formal study comparing vocalizations across their global range. And it's a project I'm really hoping to dive into soon. But just to give you a taste, I'm taking you down the rabbit hole with me. And hopefully this is as cool to you as it is to me. But their bark here, that contact call, it sounds so different. And I'll play on the right here the North American birds first. So this is from North Dakota. Oh, that is the South American birds. Here's the North American. Okay, and then we'll go back here. And this is the South American birds. So interestingly distinct. Now, like I said, we've gone down the rabbit hole, but to bring it back home, how did this whole thing start for Andy and I in Maryland specifically? And well, that was, right home to the International Owl Center in Onalaska, Wisconsin, in October 2023 at the International or the World Owl Conference. And this is where I'll pass it off to Andy here so he can tell you a little bit more about what happened at this conference.
Thank you, Alex. That was awesome. Perfect intro to where we are and where we're going. In Maryland, with the Farmland Raptor program, we have identified the four focus species. The barn owl, the short-eared owl, American kestrel, and northern harrier. Because of our experience and work with the Nest Box program, which we talked about last week, we had developed some fairly extensive conservation goals for barn owl and for American kestrel, but we really didn't have a whole lot set for. We didn't really know where we were going with short-eared owl. Short-eared owl tends to be mostly a winter visitor to our state, and that and a very irregular breeder. So developing some conservation goals and action on what to do with them was a bit of a puzzle for us until we attended the World Owl Conference. We met up with a number of different short-eared owl researchers from around the world, and the International Short-eared Owl Working Group was discussed and talked about and started to take shape. So with that, there were some discussions about some objectives on what we need to do with short-eared owls globally. So if you look at the objectives that were identified by the working group, population structure was one of the main ones, and population structure focuses mainly on taxonomy that Alex discussed a little bit earlier, and phylogeny, which is the origin of these birds. Well, that's done by examining genetic variation. Are these birds genetically different in different parts of the world? And that's something that we all want to work on and gather this data. Migratory connectivity is essentially where these birds live and move, where they breed, where they spend the winter, what are their migratory paths, are there significant stopover areas on those migratory paths, and then population size and conservation. Short-eared owls are probably one of the least studied of all the owl species worldwide. They are declining in all of their range. So that initiated us to develop some action plans for Maryland. We wanted to have our birds in Maryland to contribute to the data set that's being collected from birds all around the world. We're collecting blood and feather samples to contribute to the genotyping project to see what degree of a genetic variation there is. Alex touched on morphology a little bit, and we've learned, through David Johnson, that there are 4 variables that are used to separate species. One is geographical isolation or distributional isolation. The other is genetics. The other is morphological differences, and the last one, vocalizations. Owls do not learn their calls. They are inherited by their parents. So slight variations among their vocalizations can actually contribute to where they are found and how they might be different from different populations around the world. So those 4 criteria are what are used to separate different species. We also wanted to look at age and sex structure of our wintering population. Do our wintering birds come back to the same locations year after year? Denver Holt has been working on, and Owl Research Institute has been working on a project with long-eared owls for more than 40 years. And Alex told us that long-eared are close cousins to short ears. They have found that these different wintering habitats attract long-eared owls year after year for decades and decades. But interestingly enough, it may not necessarily be the same birds that come back to that location every year. Does this occur with short-eared owls? This is something we would like to find out, specifically in Maryland. We talked a little bit about migratory connectivity. Are these birds, where do they breed? Are they coming back year after year to the wintering grounds in our state? Or is there potentially a resident population? And lastly, we have to figure out how to catch them. Effective trapping techniques. So that's where we needed to start. How do we catch these birds? We did a tremendous amount of research, talking to researchers from around the world, how to capture these birds. There's a lot of information out there about larger populations, not low abundance areas like we experience here in Maryland. This is a paper by Travis Boom in Alaska, who has had great success capturing them with rocket nets shot from a helicopter as they fly over and able to capture the birds. Well, obviously, we don't have that available to us, so we had to come up with some other ideas. Denver published this paper about potential capture techniques as it relates to nesting sites there in Montana. But interestingly, he talks about the use of mist nets and balshatry traps, perch traps, Swedish goshawk traps, those sort of things. And these are all different techniques that we wanted to try to explore. We spoke with Libby Erickson, who was University of Illinois working on her master's thesis on capturing short-eared owls using perch top traps, which we were particularly interested in. So we started out with a shotgun type approach. You know, we mentioned that this is a relatively new project. We started this in 2023, the winter of 2023-24, trying after our discussions at the World Owl Conference with some of the international short-eared owl working group. So we kind of took an approach. Nobody really knows for sure. There's not been a whole lot published in terms of effective methods for capturing wintering short-eared owls in low population densities. Let's give a try with everything and see what works. So we're gonna start out here with a perch top trap that we have two particular designs. One is the verbale, which a lot of people are familiar with, where the bird lands on the perch, springs it open, and a string wraps around the legs. The other is a noose carpet, which is a small section with monofilament nooses on. When the bird lands on the perch, gets his feet tangled in the monofilament, and then is captured that way. So we have identified, probably about a half a dozen to 10 locations in the state of Maryland where are historically good wintering areas for short-eared owl, and those are our targeted areas for trapping. So we took the perches out there on the night that we're going to trap, set them up, and the traps are equipped with a little indicator light, so that when a bird lands on the post, springs the trap, a light will come on, and we sat and we watched, and no light ever came on. So in our first year, we had no captures at all with our perch traps. The second year, after talking with Libby, we figured out, next slide, that Libby was using fence rows that had been in place for years, and these were the fence posts where the birds were actually perching. So we had the idea of, well, let's take these perches and put them out in our trapping areas in the early fall before the short ears arrive. That way they get used to using these perches throughout the fall and winter season. And then on the night that we want to trap, we'll just go in and put our trap there, and bang, we'll get them, right? Well, unfortunately, the answer was no. Again, our second year of trapping, no light ever came on. This is a shot of our colleague, Melissa Boyle-Acuti, showing that we found pellets. They actually did use our perches, which is really kind of cool. We put them out there early in the fall, and they liked them, and they used them. Found pellets around the base and whitewash and so forth, but they didn't land on the perches when we installed the traps. So maybe the drastic change of having a new device on their familiar perch caused them a little bit of discomfort, and they wouldn't land. So this year we tried something else. We tried to tweak that a little bit. We made structures and attached structures to our perch that looked like our traps, dummy traps, if you may. Okay, the ones on the left there are the noose carpet. There's no noose carpet there, but the bird becomes familiar with it, lands on it, and then on the night we come to trap, we go ahead and stick the noose carpet in, and it looks like the same perch. Hasn't changed much in appearance. The one on the right is our verbale model, our dummy verbale. We have tried this in 2 locations so far this year, only on 2 nights, and unfortunately no lights have come on yet, but we haven't given up hope. We're going to try this a little bit more in depth. The one night that we trapped with our dummy traps was a wildlife refuge on the Delmarva that is extremely popular with photographers, as you can see. The birds love to perch on our perches, and the photographers like to take the photos. So we get a photographic documentation of the birds actually using our perches. But the night that we arrived, or the evening we arrived, there were a long string of photographers out there, so the birds actually never did come to the perches. So we're going to give it another go around and keep trying and see if we can get them to use them. Another approach that we have tried out is something called a balshatri or balshatri trap, developed in India. It's a small cage that you bait with a live animal. In our case, we use European starlings and meadow-voles, Microtus pennsylvanicus. Around the outside of the cage are these small little fishing line nooses, so that when the raptor comes in to try to get to the bait animal, he gets his feet tangled in these little nooses and is captured. Our first year, we thought, well, we've got to figure out the way to keep these things active and out all night long, because the owls are out there at night. So we've developed this elaborate system of setting up the BC trap and a switch, so that when the trap moves slightly, the switch would come on, indicator light, so we would know if something hit the trap. And I don't know how many we had. Numerous false alarms. The vole running around inside would wiggle the trap, and switch would come on, and nothing there. And at night, the starlings, hunkered down and went to sleep, and they weren't active. So running the BC traps all night long has pretty much proven to be non-effective. So we're kind of really focusing on using them during the daylight hours and then pulling them in after it gets dark. Interesting little story, funny little story over in the lower right hand photo is that our friend David Johnson recommended that we use Doritos to keep the meadow voles active and alive throughout the night. He said that Doritos don't lose their crunch power during the high humidity of the late evening, and that the owls could still hear them munching on the Doritos instead of a dog biscuit or something or of that sort. So we haven't been able to prove that really, but we gave it a try. So the folks that work at Seattle Tacoma International Airport use a trap called a Swedish goshawk trap. They're capturing short-eared owls and relocating them away from the runways, so that they lessen plane collisions. And the Swedish goshawk trap it works as this device here, A-frame device, sits on top of a cage that you use live baited animals in. In SeaTac's situation, they use pigeons and starlings and set these out there. And as the owls investigate the bait, they trigger a post that's strung between the two doors and knock it down, and the doors close on top of it. We made a slight adjustment to the goshawk trap, as seen in our next slide. that we wanted to put this out and leave it out all night, but we needed to know if it got triggered. So we added this little indicator light on the end, so that when the doors closed, it triggered a switch and the light would come on. Here again, we put this thing out there, baited it with starlings. The owls didn't seem to have any interest in it whatsoever. We did attract a red-tailed hawk who thought he might get a free meal, but he actually didn't get captured. He took off and flew away. Interestingly, the folks at SeaTac and other areas who are using the Swedish goshawk trap is that they set these things out there and leave them out there. They're not pulling them in or just putting them out for a one night occurrence. So they actually become part of the landscape that the owls then become used to seeing them out there. And then all of a sudden, hey, look, there's a pigeon or a starling in there, and that's probably why they're more successful at capturing them. They leave them out all night long and then check them in the morning, and they've got an owl inside. So the last method that we have experimented with was mist nets, and everybody's pretty familiar with how a mist net works, strung between two poles. And we're looking at attracting the birds using a lure, an audio lure, very similar to what we do with saw-whet owls. So we started out with we know that the short ears get up and start hunting before sunset. They're crepuscular and will fly around even as early as mid-afternoon and start hunting. So we wanted to get out there and put our nets up, use the lures to see if they would get captured in the nets. Unfortunately, they saw the nets. They were able to see them and avoid them. We watched them fly up over top of them, fly around them, and not actually get captured. We captured some meadowlarks and other birds, and even had a harrier chase after a meadowlark that was actually entangled in the net at one point. But the shorties just did not have interest. They were very wary and stayed away. And as a matter of fact, in this particular instance, we watched them fly around the nets and around the lure, and about an hour later, they vacated that area and started hunting in an adjacent section of the grassland, where they stayed for the remainder of the night, and they never came back to this. To the net array or the lure call. So we thought, well, maybe we should set them up at sunset. And here again, we watched the owls fly up and over the net. They were interested in the audio. They came close, but they still were able to see the nets. This is a good slide showing a rather windy night. You can see our nets bellowing in the wind, and we have found that on windy nights that they're just not very effective. So now we start to put our nets up until well after dark. And as a matter of fact, all of the short-eared owls that we have captured have been in this type of scenario. Nets put up after dark, audio turned on at that time, and we've been successful at catching the owls when we install the nets after dark. We've tried with a couple of different net arrays, talked with folks in the UK and elsewhere about how many nets do you need? Should they be in a certain shape or a configuration? They've had success capturing owls with just one net and one audio lure, and bingo, that's what we have as well. We've tried some T arrangements, V arrangements, things of that nature, and we may still experiment with some of that at some other locations that allow us to do so. So this is a really cool video using our thermal camera, watching short-eared owl flying at night. He's clearly interested in the audio lure. but it's a bright moon night, and it might be difficult, but you could be able to see the net itself in this video. But clearly, he flies up and over the net. He sees the net and doesn't get captured. So our thoughts are now that we need to really focus our capture efforts during nights of close to pure darkness, with little or no moonshine, so that these birds have difficulty seeing the nets. We're going to consider coming up here soon, maybe lifting the nets a little bit higher, and see what kind of results we get with that. Our audio lure, we've experimented with a number of different types of audios. The hoot, which you heard earlier, the male advertisement hoot, which you heard earlier, the female's bark, and and then lastly a vole squeak. So we're going to run through those real quickly. Alex is going to demonstrate. This is the male advertisement hoot. And the female bark. Yeah, that's typically what we hear when the owls are flying around the net, that long drawn out yep call. And then lastly is the vole squeak. So we have had most of our success, in fact, almost entirely all of our success, with a recording of the male hoot interspersed with the vole squeak. So it'll play about 45 seconds of the male, 45 seconds in between. It'll play the male hoot, it'll wait 45 seconds, play the vole squeak, and then wait. So alternating between the two. That's what we have captured all of our owls with. Not sure if they're attracted to the male hoot or if they're attracted to the vole squeak. We have also captured 3 barn owls using this lure. So whether the barn owls are trying to bully the short ears or if they're drawn in by the vole squeak, that's a good question. We don't know. But that kind of leads us to this next funny little story. One of our trapping locations is a private property, and they have a caretaker manager who is a longtime retired fish and wildlife biologist and has traveled the world, done lots of work with birds, and has experience capturing short-eared owls out west in California. And he has to be present with us to take us on the property every time we go. And so he has essentially told us that the vole squeak is the key. That he's captured these birds by using the vole squeak and nothing else. So in our first season, we had a number of different audio broadcasting devices, and they were relatively poor quality. And our friend Jay was like, you're never going to catch anything with these poor quality broadcasts. So we make a net check and come back, and all of a sudden, where's Jay? He's not anywhere to be found. And somebody said, well, he went back up to the net. He took his army blanket and went back up to the net and laid down underneath the net with his army blanket and started making vole squeaks with his hand and his mouth. At that time, we had an array of about 7 nets in length, and we had numerous broadcasting microphones at different locations along the net. So after about an hour, it was ready to check the nets again, and bingo, we caught our very first short-eared owl. And Jay swears that it's because he was laying underneath the net and using his voice and his fingers to attract the bird. Interestingly enough, this bird was captured in the net directly right above the microphone from the audio lure. And we found that when we capture these birds, they definitely are right above the lure, right above the collar. So we have captured, we have trapped at, these are the locations that we've trapped at throughout the state of Maryland. It's pretty widespread, from Frederick County north and the north end, Prince George's in Montgomery County, Talbot, Dorchester, and then down in Somerset. The majority of the owls that we have caught have been in the mist net with the audio lure, kind of as I've indicated before. But last March, we did, coming to the end of the trapping season, we did actually get a bird on our Balshatri trap. This was in northern Maryland, Frederick County. We set the BC with the starling in it out during daylight hours. Really kind of thinking, well, maybe we'll get a harrier or whatever, since we hadn't caught any short ears on the BC. And other Raptor banders have told us that these guys are particularly difficult to capture. So we put the trap out, and sure enough, the short ear came up and he started to hunt, and he saw the starling, and he came over to the trap, landed on the power pole right above the trap, and sat there for about 15 to 20 minutes, just watching the starling in the trap. And we thought, geez, is he going to go down there and get it? Our experience with catching hawks are, once they see this thing, they're pretty aggressive on it. But this guy sat there on the pole for about 20 minutes and then finally dropped down. Well, we couldn't see where we were sitting. We couldn't see the traps exactly, but he never came back up. So we decided, okay, let's get over there and see. And sure enough, we had him on the BC. So is this a matter of late season hunger? That's why we got him on the Balshatri trap, or is that something that we need to start looking at a little bit more in depth? We've learned with the mist nets that it's very difficult to draw these birds from one location over to your nets. We really essentially have to find out where they're hunting and where they're going and take the traps to them, because they don't, even though they can hear it, they have a tendency not to leave the spot where they're finding food. So one particular night, on one of our trap sites on the island, Poplar Island, we had all of our nets set up and our traps set up in one area, and one of the staff members said, I've got owls up here on the road all night up here on the north end of the island. We didn't have any nets up there. So at midnight, we gathered all of our stuff, took it all the way up there, set it, and don't you know, we caught 2 short ears after moving all our traps closer. And they definitely could hear the audio lure from where they were. They just did not want to leave the spot. They were finding food and hadn't really no need to leave it. So we are now using our BC traps, our Balshatri traps, just during the daylight hours, and then we pull them in after it gets dark. So hopefully we'll be able to get some more. Keeping in mind that all of this trapping effort is really only based on 3 seasons of work. Our first year we caught 0 birds. The second year we caught 5, and so far this year we have caught 3. So we've caught 8 short-eared owls in our efforts. And prior to that, only 1 short-eared owl adult short-eared owl had ever been banded in the state of Maryland. So Alex is going to talk to you about that coming up here next.
Thanks, Andy. So let's see here. So we have these birds in hand. We get these birds in hand. Andy told you a little bit about that and how we do that. But how are we taking advantage of having these birds in hand? And complementary to all the museum work that we've been doing, we're also collecting morphometric data on these live birds. So you could see here, this is some images of that happening, taking wing chord, tail length, tarsus, all these pretty standard measurements. But we're also looking at hallux length, culmen, primary shortfalls, like the image over here on the bottom right, amount of white on the secondary tips, and things like that. We're doing wing tracings, like you can see in the upper left here, which is it's useful for calculating this wing surface area and this wing loading, all really useful for assessing regional differences. And something that we've started implementing this year, and it's a project that's really special to me, is this standardized photography protocol, like you can see in action right here. But why are we doing this, right? And it all comes back to the fact that aging short-eared owls is really, really difficult. And aging is as important in field work and work with birds, because it's how we build these population age structures. It's how we start answering these demographic questions. And despite some resources suggesting that short-eared owls have incomplete to complete molts, we actually have never seen clear molt limits or obvious feather generations in the birds that we're catching during the winter, these in the flight feathers. Now, we've tried black lighting. You might be familiar with this technique where you take a black light and you can observe the porphyrin, so the amount of pinkish glow in the wings. And I don't have an image of this because we've never observed this in short-eared owls. Maybe we see like a little pinkish hue, but it's always uniform across the flight feathers. So there's no age differences. And the amount of porphyrin, so this pinkish glow in the flight feathers, is indicative of different ages of the feathers. So the more pink feathers will be newer feathers, because that pink, it degrades over time. It degrades with UV exposure as well. And the UV exposure it's a real key to understanding short-eared owls and kind of conceptualizing why this idea might not work so well, even though I believe that these short-eared owls that we're working with just do not have a molt limit, do not have these obvious feather generations. And that's because porphyrin degrades with UV exposure. So these short-eared owls, they're sitting on the ground out in the sun, not like your typical owls, hunkered up against a tree trunk out of the sun, and retaining that porphyrin much more effectively. But anyway, through this standardized photography protocol, we're starting to build this consistent visual data set, something that we can refer back to and build on as aging techniques improve. And perhaps these photographs can help us improve these aging techniques as well. So for every short-eared owl that we have in hand, we're now documenting spread wings, spread tails, other key plumage features in this very consistent and standardized way. And the goal, right, is to build this photo catalog to help us compare these individuals and ultimately refine these aging techniques for short-eared owls. And this idea, this standardized photography, is inspired actually by the Red-tailed Hawk project, which maybe some of you are familiar with. And I first saw some folks on the project present at the 2024 Raptor Research Conference in North Carolina. And, I followed up afterward and I got to reconnect with them down in Costa Rica just in 2025. And they were incredibly encouraging about me, us adapting this method for short-eared owls and starting this documentation process. But to circle back to what Andy mentioned, beyond some of these deeper investigations that we're doing, we're banding these birds. And before we started this project, like he said, short-eared owls were getting virtually no attention in our state. And really to emphasize that point, in fact, like Andy said, there was only one adult short-eared owl ever banned in Maryland. And that was back in 1975. So when we banded our first bird, it had been half a century, like 50 years of silence, essentially. No banding of these birds. And, to go along with that, no attention to them at all, really, in the state. And coincidentally, right before this project was even a thought in Andy or I's mind, in April 2023, to set the scene, this is out on Poplar Island. So this is out in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay. It's a relatively small island. And there's some U.S. Fish and Wildlife researchers that they're doing some work that I'm not exactly sure. I don't recall what they were doing, but they walked out into the grasses. And all of a sudden they flush a female short-eared owl in April, which is quite an odd time to see a short-eared owl in Maryland, out of the grasses. And before they knew it, they stumbled right on this. This is the first confirmed, you can see right in there, short-eared owl nest in Maryland in decades. And just by sheer luck, Melissa, who you saw earlier holding that owl pellet, one of her colleagues, she was on the island that same day to band barn owl chicks, actually. And she just so happened to have the right band size for short-eared owls and ended up banding the second, third, fourth, and fifth short-eared owls ever banned in the state. But they were all chicks, right? So there's no adults still since 1975. But interestingly enough, one of these chicks was re-encountered in January 2025 when it was shot, lethally removed as a flight safety risk at Reagan National Airport here, just 35 miles west of where it hatched, on Poplar Island. And the fact that they shot it really adds to the discussion that, you know, Andy led earlier about how difficult it is to capture these birds. I mean, if USD APHIS at that airport was able to capture this bird, they would have absolutely preferred to do that instead of having to resort to these methods. But for a species like the short-eared owl, you know, especially the nominate Plummeus, that subspecies that Andy and I work with, that subspecies in North America and across the Northern Hemisphere, it's highly nomadic. And this kind of short distance movement is somewhat surprising to me and Andy and others as well. It's not something that's well documented in the literature, and it raises questions for us about how some individuals might be using the mid-Atlantic landscape, at least this like relative site fidelity, dare I say. But given that the mid-Atlantic lies within their traditional wintering range, not their breeding range, and considering the region's temperate climate, relatively stable food supply year-round, few of us in Maryland, myself included, are really interested in the idea that the birds breeding on Poplar Island, they may not have to migrate necessarily. I mean, I think this is a reasonable hypothesis. I'm really throwing it out there. But, you know, we hope to investigate this further. And this leads me to something important that I want to talk about next. And the way that we hope to investigate this on Poplar Island is through this transmitter work, this tracking work. It brings me to a big future goal of ours, which is bringing this telemetry work to the east, helping expand it. Because aside from one pilot study that was conducted in New York and a small scale effort that's actually currently underway in Maine, there's been virtually no tracking work on short-eared owls in the eastern US. There has been important work done in Europe, but globally, peer-reviewed telemetry on this species is pretty few and far between. In fact, one of the most formally peer-reviewed efforts to date in the US, actually really the only peer-reviewed transmitter study is Johnson et al. 2017. So this is a figure from that paper. And for a highly nomadic species like the short-eared owl, this kind of data is vital. It gives us the year-round picture. We need to actually protect the habitats throughout their annual cycle that matter most. And that's why at the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership, our Farmland Raptor program it's operating with the understanding that effective conservation, it must be collaborative. I mean, it has to be cross-regional, has to be informed by real movement data, and that's what we're working towards. And I want to take a moment to circle back again here to mating behavior, because honestly, it's just too cool not to mention. And spoiler alerts have already come out in this talk, but short-eared owl male courtship flight is just one of the things that really, it never stops. It never gets any less cool to me. And honestly, it wouldn't be a proper short-eared owl talk if I didn't bring it up. So what the males do is they fly way high into the air and they let out this series of hoots, which I'll play for you in just a second. And then these hoots are followed by a dive where they bring their wings underneath their body very quickly and clap them together. And I'll play this. You'll first hear the hoots, and then a few seconds later, you'll hear the wing claps. And the wing claps are coming. Then here is a video where you can actually see this dive happening. So you can't hear, don't worry. It's going to play again in slow motion, but you can see that those wing claps, and then this is at full speed, so you can see how quickly that actually happens. It's a very difficult thing to get a video of. There you go. It's pretty cool. Now, personally, I've never observed this behavior in Maryland, but obviously it's occurring as the birds spread on Poplar Island in 2023, and they've subsequently been seen actually this past year throughout the summer. And there's been no direct evidence in terms of, you know, a nest or anything like that found since 2023. But, you know, we're seeking permission to do a proper survey. This is a photograph taken by my friend of a short-eared owl during the summer months on Poplar Island. However, this deceased bird popped up on the road on Poplar Island in July. And to me, this appears to be a juvenile. Now, the juvenile stage of the short-eared owl, it's fairly poorly documented, actually. And by the juvenile stage, I mean the plumage before they enter their formative, or you can think of it as their like teenage plumage. And that stage pretty much looks like the adult plumage, pretty much. But from personal photo study, I've noticed a few things that stand out. And one of them is this bold black mask here, especially the black kind of the eyeglasses look, or, you know, more technically termed, the black extending into the laurel area there. And it gives them, how I like to remember, it gives them this Gene Simmons look. So, you know, that dark, heavy mask. If you don't know who Gene Simmons is, here's a photo. He's the bassist and co-lead singer of the band Kiss. But anyway, along with that face pattern, you can also see a few other things that are, to me, juvenile tells. So these downy feathers, and we won't really focus on the belly because it was fairly destroyed, but especially these upper tail coverts. So these feathers right underneath the thumb here. I mean, just the barb structure, but they're very downy. So, you know, like what a down jacket is filled with. They're these fluffy feathers that keep the juvenile birds warm when they're very, very young. And the upper tail coverts of an adult short-eared owl, they're tan. So I can scroll back here and I can zoom in actually, and you can see how just tan and nicely like scalloped, almost darkly scalloped on the edges these are. And then these with the buffy tips, you can see just how like thin these are and downy. And, you know, this bird really caught my eye. But just to make sense of how underdocumented this stage is, when I was pouring through publicly available photo archives on Macaulay Library, so it's Cornell's photo archive, if you're not familiar, I looked, and if you filter by juvenile, so this filter right here, under location, yep, right there, you can see that for long-eared owls, you get 545 photos, you know, 261 audio recordings, etc. For short-eared owls, you only get 103 photos, 11 audio recordings, 2 videos, and short-eared owls, they're more widespread. I mean, this is including all the subspecies, and this is all we're getting. You're getting, you know, a lot more documentation of their close cousins, which are arguably difficult bird to find and document. Now, I mean, there's some of these that are mislabeled, but I still think that this is a good way to drive home the point. Anyway, this is my personal opportunity in PSA. You know, if you're a short-eared owl researcher in the audience, you have known age juvenile photos, I would really love to talk to you. I could go on about this for hours and nerd out about it, but I'll hold myself back and I'll bring it home here. Why does this work matter? Okay, why does this work matter for the Maryland Bird Conservation Partnership, for the Farmland Raptor program? Short-eared owls, they're a regional priority. They're a species of greatest conservation need, as I mentioned earlier. In Maryland, they're listed as an S1B, so that's S1 breeder, meaning critically imperiled. Zoom out across the mid-Atlantic, you can see that same pattern. So these are negatively based colors here. You can see this key here: imperiled, critically imperiled, vulnerable, etc. You zoom out to the entire United States, North America here, and you can see that visually this isn't looking so different, in my opinion, in terms of color scale, but they are listed as G5 secure nationally. And then globally, they're listed as a species of greatest conservation need. I'm sorry, they're listed as a species of least concern here, according to the IUCN. But that's exactly why this work matters, because when a species is labeled as secure at the global scale, it can really mask these urgent local declines. Conservation funding, it follows perception, and perception depends on understanding. And taxonomy, it's not just about naming birds, it's not just about birders getting another tick on their life list. It's really how we define these units of conservation. It's how we recognize these population level threats. It's the basis for protections, for funding, for management plans. The more clearly do we understand these short-eared owls, their structure, their variation, their movements, the better that we can understand them. And for me, the short-eared owl is more than just a study subject for Andy and I. It's really a bird that's close to our hearts. And I always end my talk, if you saw last week, with a reminder, a spin on this old phrase, this old poster here. Smokey the Bear here, listen to him. Only you can help farmland raptors. Short-eared owls are, they're a grassland bird, part of the most rapidly declining avian groups in North America. They need these open spaces, these healthy prey populations, and they need better recognition, of their conservation needs. And again, if you were here last week, you know how much I love these Roger Tory Peterson quotes. And this one really hits home with me, especially when it comes to short-eared owls, just given how close they are to my heart. And that is, the truth of the matter is, the birds could very well live without us, but many, perhaps all of us, would find life incomplete, indeed almost intolerable, without the birds. And, thank you for listening to Andy and I talk your ears off about short-eared owls. If you work with short-eared owls, I'd love to connect with you, as would the short-eared owl working group. If you have any questions, or you're local and you'd like to get involved with the Maryland Farmland Raptor program as a volunteer, here's my contact info. Scan the QR code, go to our website. And thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And one of the people you need to get in touch with right away would be Tristan Williams at the Scottish Owl Center. They actually have had short-eared owls breed in captivity. So if they continue to do that, he would be somebody. I don't know if he's got known age pictures from before, but I'll connect you with Tristan.
Awesome.
Joe, do you want to start grabbing questions from the Q&A? And if you want to stop the share, I think these links have been shared in the chat in Zoom and in YouTube. So those should be there for folks to come back to. Joe, want to grab a question? We've got some stuff coming in.
Yeah, so using the audio lures, have you been capturing more males or females? And you talked a little bit about age, but do you know roughly the ages of the ones that you captured?
I think this is like an interesting point to bring up, maybe some of David's work, with burrowing owls. And I guess you'll maybe see where I'm going in a second, Andy, and be able to contribute here. But I think that this is just, a hypothesis at this point. But we're capturing a lot of females. And I think that it might be relevant that females are perhaps moving further south than a lot of males. And David, our friend, he put transmitters on the burrowing owls, right, Andy? And he actually found that the males were not moving very far from their breeding grounds at all, and they were moving north. So I think this is an interesting thing with owls. We see it with saw-whets as well, right? So that perhaps could be the sex bias that we're experiencing, or the reason for it. And as far as aging goes, it becomes more and more of a mystery to me the deeper I go. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. It is shown, snowy owls, burrowing owls, saw-whet owls, that males tend to stay closer to the breeding territory. They want to try to get back to their well-established breeding grounds, so that they don't lose them to competition. So that does probably contribute to the sex bias. But we're only looking at such a small sample size here. We're only seeing 8 birds. So that's something we really need to get more data on.
Okay, this one comes over from YouTube, and they're wondering, well, question and then some comments, wondering if you're considering cellular tracking technology or MODIS. And the person who asked is a bander in West Virginia who was unfamiliar with your work and has been writing up a project for them as a state in West Virginia to also study short-eared owls. So they want to get in contact with you to discuss some collaboration. But the question is about cellular tracking technology or MODIS.
I'm going to sneak in there with a question from Zoom asking if you've been thinking about using the tags like Project Snowstorm has used.
Yeah, absolutely. We're still pouring through our options, aren't we? I mean, we really hope to get it off the ground this year. But we are some of the tags that we were considering using are very expensive. Microwave telemetry was used in the Johnson paper, but they're like, I think $4,200 a pop. That's a hefty price, especially when you're considering all the other associated costs with Argos and satellite and all the GPS stuff. So yeah, I don't have a great answer to that now, but I would love to get in touch with whoever's in West Virginia. Andy and I were talking about, I think there's like a 18 bird roost that we were hearing about out there this year. And that is just foreign to us in Maryland. So we were thinking about, finding a way to get ourselves over there actually, but it'd be great to collaborate.
So some of the transmitter work is, here again, you're talking about a very little amount of research that's being done on short-eared owls, whereas snowy owls have had virtually 25 years of work with transmitters on them since 2013. So they've been able to really work out lots of kinks and come up with a protocol method that works very well. Short ears are still in the early stages of that development, and it has some of the early work with transmitters has had a pretty high mortality rate associated with them. So some of that needs to be kind of worked out a little bit before we really get into deploying a whole lot of transmitters. One of the things that David Johnson, our mentor, kind of mentioned is that these birds are taking off, leaping from the ground oftentimes, and maybe that 3% weight, minimal weight of a transmitter is too much for them. So it inhibits their ability to really take off, whereas other owls are relying on gravity as they take off from a higher perches. It's it's an idea, it's a thought, but yeah, so that's kind of where we are in terms of transmitter work.
Yeah, and before anybody points it out, I'll point it out. We are aware of the wonderful work that's being done over in Europe, where they're not really experiencing mortality like some of the work that's been done over here. So it's a great thing to consider.
Of all the research questions that you're pursuing, which one motivates you the most and why?
God, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm really excited about the possibility of transmitter work. I don't know about you, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just feels like such a new frontier and an opportunity for some really cool collaboration.
And answer a lot of those migratory connectivity questions of, is this bird truly nomadic, or is it does it have high winter and breeding fidelity? So that's
Okay, here's a question from someone in Minnesota, wondering if you're familiar with the Keystone Wildlife Management Area in central Minnesota. Short-eared owls were there last winter until mid-March. This year, they're basically gone. Prior to this winter, there were significant disturbances by dog training clubs and installation of a pipeline. How likely do you think was their disturbance due to their disappearance due to the disturbance? They typically breed in northwestern Minnesota.
I think it's all about food. It's always all about food. I just don't know enough about that particular site, but it makes me think about, I live in Baltimore, Maryland, in the city, and there's this one spot right near my house called Masonville Cove, and it is this, I can't give a proper like acreage estimate or anything like that, but it is seriously this one little strip of grass. Maybe not little, but in comparatively to some of the areas that you'll see short-eared owls in, and there's been a short-eared owl there all winter just hunting next to this Mercedes lot where they store cars to be sold, and on the other side is the Baltimore Harbor. So it's just this one little strip of grass, and it obviously has enough food, so the short-eared owl is just sticking it out. So I would assume that wherever this area is that you're talking about, if there was enough food, that short-eared owls would take advantage of that. So there must be something that is discouraging them either from being there in terms of disturbance, like the hunting dog training, or just a down vole year or something like that.
Along with other disturbances, this person says, as photographing short-eared owls in Maryland has become hugely popular, do you think that, like their regular posts, photographers become part of their landscape?
I mean, yeah, they're not the most timid birds, are they, Andy? Like a lot of the time they'll fly right by these photographers. I would say so. The photographers, as long as they're well behaved, there's no reason that the short-eared owls should be too discouraged from approaching them and avoiding them.
Okay, another question. Since short-eared owls, barn owls, and northern harriers often use the same habitats, how do you think competition plays a role in their population status, nesting, and occupancy?
Do you want to take this one, Andy, given the barn owl tie?
Sure. Obviously they are competing for the same food sources. There's no question about that. In terms of interactions, you've lots of folks have posted videos, and we've all seen, short-eared owl and harrier interactions, where they're, seem to be aggressive towards each other, both ways, actually. So it's not always where the harriers chasing off the short ear or vice versa. I think they've just learned to live together, and they will they'll aggravate each other, especially if one has a vole. They'll certainly try to steal it in both directions. So it's interesting. I don't know. Barn owl is a much larger, much more muscular and stout bird than the short ear is. And you really don't see that unless you get them in hand side by side. So that in my opinion, that a barn owl could certainly bully a short ear. But these locations that we trap have had populations of short-eared owls for decades. And barn owls have been there and harriers have been there too. So I don't foresee that the competition is really creating a negative effect on their populations.
There was a question last week that kind of got at this concept that I brought up, like they're occupying these different times of day when they're hunting, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
these different like temporal niches that they're occupying. So you got the harrier during the day, you got the short-eared owl, they're crepuscular, so they're at dawn and dusk. Then you got the barn owl, which is primarily nocturnal, and there's overlap, obviously, but that always plays an important role, I think, and is important to acknowledge. So
Yeah, I'd hate to be a vole. Certainly 24/7.
don't get a break.
Yeah.
So here's a comment from Jim Duncan out of Manitoba.
Hi, Jim.
We had success with a trail camera set up near the ground pointing up to capture birds, including short-eared owls landing on fence posts in remote prairies or grasslands. Have you tried this as a remote monitoring of phenology or occurrence? Might be useful to ID currently used areas to trap owls.
Pete's doing that.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. We have not used it, and it was something that was unfamiliar with us. So yeah, that's something that we would be really interested to implement. Yeah.
What I meant when I said Pete, this collaborator really with U.S. Fish and Wildlife out on Poplar. He's putting up trail cameras on our perches that we've installed there to monitor their use rather than us just checking to see if there's whitewash or pellets. So, and they're using them there too. I actually should have thrown some of those pictures in the presentation. I didn't think of it until now.
This person would like if you could throw out the name of the lead researchers working with the Galapagos short-eared owls, and what species of petrels were the owls feeding on in the Galapagos? Oh, you're muted, Alex.
Wedge rump storm petrels, I believe. And let me see here. I'm so good with names, but maybe not faces all the time.
We have a Galapagos short-eared owl person in the chat right now.
Oh, great. Well, maybe they can help. But I know that Petra Gutner, right?
Yep, that's who it is.
Oh, yeah, great. Well, Petra, please help me and acknowledge everybody if you can. That'd be wonderful. But yeah, I'm looking right now at our little global short-eared owl working group chat and trying to pull everybody. I should have written down their affiliations in there in my contacts.
So I'll read out. Petra did submit a question to the Q&A. We are working on the Galapagos short-eared owls and have worked extensively with various tracking technologies. There we face the challenge of not having a cell phone network, so no GSM transmission, and can likely advise quite comprehensively what worked and what did not work for them. Keeping in mind that ours are heavier and can thus carry higher tag weights than yours, we are currently very happy with the Druid X1 units, solar using the UB-Link satellite network.
Awesome.
I'll leave it at that, but feel free to get in touch, and then left a website. So I'll send that to you guys specifically.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Petra.
This person asks if you've thought about fitting color rings. They're cheap and easy for photographers to record.
So I'd be curious if there are any folks with experience doing this on short ears. I forget who we talked to, Andy, but somebody did that, didn't they?
Yeah.
But we can never see the bands. They preen their feathers, their tarsal feathers over the bands. So it would have to be quite the hefty color band to be effective. And I wish I had a picture. There's a right kind of like past their carpal. There's usually a mark on P10, the 10th primary, that's quite unique between individual short-eared owls that I started to notice. And given that our study sites are typically like these low density wintering populations, we can actually look at some of our study sites and tell, okay, this is definitely the short-eared owl that Andy and I banded, and you cannot see the band. I mean, there's 100 pictures of this thing on Facebook. I know for sure that's our bird, just given how unique those markings are. And you can't see anything. So if anybody has experience with that working, I'd love to know, but that's why we've been avoiding it.
The person that asked the question says that they do use them and are successful, and uses them in conjunction with satellite tags.
Cool.
Yeah, please reach out. We would definitely like to collaborate.
Absolutely.
Are you allowed to crowdfund for anything, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization, so yeah, we definitely rely on donations for.
Yep. And there is a donate button on our website, right up in the right-hand corner. It's quite obvious. It says support birds.
I put a link to that in the chat.
Thank you.
Are there any of the short-eared owl populations in the world threatened with extinction?
There's regionally declining populations, but I don't think there's any that are, I would say, are at risk of distinction, at least to my knowledge. Cannot at least be classified as such currently. So
I'm going to combine a question and a comment because they both relate to the owl shot at Reagan. So Melissa, apparently you know who that is. Melissa says that the owl that APHIS had to remove at Reagan was supposed to be going to the Smithsonian Feather Lab. So that would be a known age owl for you to possibly photograph. And then someone else asks how receptive Reagan and other regional airports would be to trapping the owl rather than shooting it.
I can imagine that they would be very receptive, which is, Andy and I really, we had to start from the ground up, like he was saying, right? And we had to figure out how to get these birds because it's not easy. We can't trap at the nest, right? You have to, just to kind of give a different perspective, I guess. What you can play on with birds is, their desire to get back to the nest, which if you were with us last week, you heard about us, using that patio trap designed at the nest box of a barn owl. But we don't really have nesting short-eared owls in Maryland. We have one nest in the last, multiple decades that's been recorded, and we didn't really know about it until the chicks were fairly grown. And we're primarily working with these wintering birds. So what can you play on? Can you play on hunger? Typically where we go, it's loaded with voles. It's just, there's voles everywhere. They're not starving. So like Andy was alluding to, with the Balsha tree trap, is it a late season thing? We don't really know. But they don't really give our Balsha tree traps much of a look. And what we found success with is playing on curiosity, more so than anything, given the hoots that we play and the Microtus vole vocalizations as well. And now I forget what the question was, but
I was going to say that's a perfect lead into the next one I have. Somebody asked if you guys have your audio lure file available for others to use.
We'd be happy to share. Yeah, we're always looking to, make this a big team effort. It's the way that conservation works, truly.
How are the captured owls calm enough to be sufficiently subdued for examination measurements and tracings?
Andy, you wanna?
Yeah, sure. All of handling different species of owls, you certainly find that some species are much more calm than others. Saw-whets, for example, are pretty calm. Whereas barn owls tend to be real footy. So, and great horned owls, for example. But they there's nothing that we, intentionally do to help calm them down. I mean, occasionally we might, if we've got a bird that's showing any, sign of of distress or snapping bill or something like that, repeatedly, we'll hood the bird. We'll put a hood on it to try to calm it. But just generally, these are relatively calm birds. They rarely ever foot, or try to foot. So it's they're definitely very easy to work with.
Yeah, and we do things like we hood them with our little nice, what did you call them last week? It was either Carla or Joe, but the owl ski masks. Is that what you said?
Mask, yeah, right, yeah.
So just cut a little slit for their beak to come through, and so their eyes aren't exposed to our headlamps if we have to use them. Yeah, and just a lot of experience like Andy has, and he's graciously trying to help me out with as well. Helps
We try to work the bird quickly so that it's not handled all that much. A lot of the measurements that we're taking, for example, we'll put it in a restraint can that a lot of raptors will use, and that allows us to take all the foot measurements and the wing measurements, while it's in the restraint can, and it makes the processing go faster, so that we're not handling the bird all as for an extensive length of time. I think the whole processing time, including photographs, is done in around 30 minutes before it's released. So it's a pretty quick. We try to work quickly. We remain quiet and calm, and get them in and out as quickly as we can.
Yes.
I'm gonna slip in a little personal question. So what kind of cans are the right size for a short-eared owl? Because I know you use tomato paste cans for saw wets.
Yeah, so we use the same can that we use for the barn owls, and it's a 4.5-inch cardboard packing tube that you can purchase anywhere, Amazon, and I've cut them into different sections, and we should have shown a photograph. I've cut a slot out of the side of it that can expose the folded wing, so that we can pull the folded wing out and do the wrist to tip measurement, the flat measurement, and do the primary shortfall measurements while it's still in the case. Hey, there he goes. All right. Yep. And you can see the slot that we've cut out. Yeah, perfect. And we can pull the wing out of that. So,
Yeah.
and it's cardboard, so it's relatively, there's no sharp edges on it. So it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah.
Somebody is wondering if you know or hypothesize anything about short-eared owl iris color changing with age.
So interesting. I was just reading Pile, which is for international folks, this is our kind of North American bird Bible, maybe some would say, with information about aging species. And Pyle does comment on change in eye color, slight, I think from like a brownish to that yellow. And I just do not see it in the available resources. Yeah, but we're definitely not seeing it with any birds that we capture once we encounter them in the winter. So if there is anything occurring, I would assume that it's minimal and maybe happening in the nest. Those photos I had up earlier, it's, if you saw the orange eyes, that is people editing their photos. That's not real.
I'm just going to throw in some personal stuff. So I've done some great horned owl banding with Martin Gerard and Dan Zazelinchik up in Saskatchewan. And one thing they've noticed is with the great horned owls that are hatched in buildings. So they have them nesting in old barns and abandoned houses and stuff. The young owls have very pale yellow irises compared to those that are hatched in open nests. And like, is the color then changing to normal? Is it, on a short-eared owl, a young one, if they're in this domed over, not exposed to as much light grass nest, maybe their irises could be paler and then get more yellow with more exposure to sunlight. I don't think anybody's ever done anything with that, but it's something, once they mentioned it to me, it certainly was noticeable in the indoor nest versus the outdoor nests.
Very cool. And I see that Joe, you messaged me, and I mean, I think it's, to give that question earlier from Petra a proper answer, and give a shout out there. The Short-Eared Owl Project in the Galapagos is led by Island Conservation. Paula Castano, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, heading the mitigation, and Vivi Huascuja Garcia, being in charge of the veterinary care for the safeguarding component within Floriana Rewild. And then from the University of Vienna, leading the tracking component on Floriana, Santa Cruz, and Isabella. We collaborate with the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior, Martin Wikelski and Jens Koblitz, to establish an infrastructure for a tracking solution on the Galapagos across systems. Also, our owls move extensively between islands. Yeah, thank you, Petra, so much for that information. I just took a picture of that as well, so I can remember it if it comes up again. But it was great. I got to meet a lot of those people in Costa Rica as well, and their research is just so fascinating.
Are you aware of any short-eared owl research being done in Minnesota?
Not aware.
And this is probably a question for Carla too.
I'm not aware of anybody either.
Just goes to show you how very little attention short-eared owls have gotten over the years, and still. So
I believe. I talked to someone in Michigan who did her master's thesis on short-eared owls in Michigan, but I don't know about Minnesota.
Somebody is wondering what millimeter size mesh nets you're using when you're mist netting.
they're 120s.
Yeah, and if you do start any work with short-eared owls, we would love to, stay connected. So don't hide unless you have to for some reason, maybe.
Are the grasslands where short-eared owls hunt in the winter the same type as where they nest? And how many areas in Maryland have that type of grassland, the nesting type?
The majority of the locations in Maryland that we see them are essentially marshlands. So on the Maryland is divided in half by Chesapeake Bay. On the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay, there are fewer marshlands, and the short ears will use pasture land and fallow field there. But over on the Delmarva Peninsula, on the eastern side of the Chesapeake Bay, they're primarily hunting marshlands. So whether or not that's like their breeding territory, good question. Yeah. We got to find out where they nest.
Well, also, I think it's relevant to remember like how much of an effect like sea level rise has in the Chesapeake Bay, right? And we experience these low tides in winter compared to what we're seeing in the summer. So, I mean, gosh, I wish I had a picture for this question, but it would take me a while to find. But one of our sites down in Southern Maryland, Rumbly Point, right? We go there now, and it's fairly dry, so the voles can venture out into this salt marsh is what it is. And then in the like summer months, I remember seeing this photo, and the road that we drive Andy's minivan down There's a photo of some guy like in chest waders with water up to his over his hips, walking down the road with an American bittern flying over his head. So it is just, it's quite different, right? And short-eared owls cannot nest in water that deep. That's not how that works.
So here's a comment from Tristan at the Scottish Owl Center, who has had their captive short-eared owls breed. He said he has not seen eye color change with age in short-eared owls so far. He has with boreal owls and some of the eagle owls, and Eurasian scops owlets are almost white, getting yellow by fledging. Their short-eared owlets had yellow from around 14 days when they first found them in the nest. And then a question, has the past couple of weeks of snow and ice caused the short-eared owls to move to find available food?
We'll find out on Tuesday. That's our next scheduled trapping night. So we have a host of volunteers who are check some of these locations for us and report back to us. So we're actually waiting to hear back to see. We've had in Central Maryland, we've had snow cover for it's going on 2 weeks now. But over on the Delmarva, it's much less. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we don't know for sure with this event. Last year, they did stay, and we actually were able to trap even with snow on the ground. So.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I told you this, but Jay told me, our friend Jay went out, and there's been this interesting push of rough-legged hawks into Maryland. I just saw a message before we started this. There's like 4 on this island off Baltimore at Hart Miller, Andy, which is just crazy. There's one at the study site that like Jay, has permissions for us to go on, and he saw 3 short-eared owls, like with this weather, and walked around and was finding I think half of Savannah sparrows scattered around. So they're not punching a hole through the snow for the voles or anything like that, but it seems like they're picking off Savannah sparrows and whatever they can find. We haven't personally been out, right, because the moon phase plays a big factor if they can see the net, and it just so happens that the past 2 weeks of it was full moon on February 1st. So
this person asks if you think there could be a bias in numbers of photos of long-eared owls on the Macaulay Library because they're harder to get.
Well, I think that, right, just given the nesting behavior of long-eared, I mean, they're tree nesters, right? So short-eared owls are buried in the grass, and they're really hard to find. There's this go in your own time. I almost put it in the talk, but like I couldn't find a way to really mold it in there. If you go and you filter by juvenile on Macaulay, there's some really cool thermal drone footage. And if you cover the thermal drone with your hand, this is what I challenge you to do. You don't look at that. And then you just look at the video of the non-thermal video. So like the actual footage, and you try to find the nests with your eyes, and then you uncover the drone footage. I bet some of you might be wrong. It's quite tricky, actually. They're pretty well hidden.
So here's goes back to your historical and history of owl stuff. Do you know when owls developed serrations on their wings? Like how many millions of years ago?
Nope, that's another rabbit hole for me.
What's known about Maryland short-eared owls' roost site selection?
Not a whole lot that I'm aware of. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean they probably will roost, though they obviously roost on the ground, next to clumps of tall, a little bit taller vegetation in the grassland. but where it's thick, they'll get right up in the, in there, and be well hidden. We don't have, to my knowledge, any records of these large communal roosts that that long ears do, and that in some areas, short ears as well. I'm not aware of any in the state of Maryland. The closest that we have come to is you hear us talk about this Poplar Island location, and there've been as many as 20 or more short-eared owls documented in the winter there. That's where we had the breeding. So that they could potentially be roosting communally on at that location, but it hasn't really actually been seen. So
Yeah.
Kind of.
Oh, do you remember when I wasn't actually there? I was at work and I couldn't get there in time. But when you tried to lower the mist net down,
yeah. Yeah.
So one of the techniques, I think it was Denver Holt, right? Maybe, who like did this. Maybe some other folks as well. But they would find a roost or a nest, perhaps it was. But like get like kind of a team of folks quietly get a mist net and hold it on all sides, and then just lower it down onto the roost so that they just kind of like, that there was nowhere to go. And I couldn't get off work in time, and it wasn't my job at the time to do this stuff, but Andy went out and gave it a shot. And what happened? They just flushed.
They
right?
flushed. Yeah.
Before you got
yeah.
there.
Right. Yeah.
So there's only one place where we've actually been able to locate a fairly consistent roost. At other sites, it seems to be very variable between individuals and within individuals between days as well. So
Kind of leading from that into this next one, and you kind of touched on nesting a little bit being rare, but is there a count of how many short-eared owl nests there have been in Maryland over the years?
such a good question, and I really, that's kind of my next paper idea for our local journal here, digging that out of the depths wherever that information is. But yeah, they're very hard to document, and I don't have a precise number for you yet, but yeah, find Maryland bird life maybe in like 6 months and my answer will be in there.
Yeah.
And I've got another one coming over from YouTube. Do you work with any rehab centers that have data or patients that they could share data about?
We tried with some of the local Maryland spots, but they just don't really get them in. They don't get them in as patients. So if you are a rehabber out there who gets short-eared owls in, I would be very, very curious. To just talk to you.
This isn't a question, but we have one comment left in the Q&A in Zoom. It says, sounds like there needs to be a short-eared owl research symposium to gather folks together who might not be aware of disparate endeavors.
There was one that Dr. Marie-Sophie Garcia Eras, who is heading up that short-eared owl working group, put together for the last Raptor research conference in Costa Rica. And yeah, I agree. More to come, please. Let's keep talking about it.
Okay, we got through everything just before the end of the time. So awesome. So thank you, Alex and Andy, for sharing this, because I mean, as we all can see, more information needs to be shared on short-eareds because there's not enough known, and people are doing a little bit here, there, and everywhere, and coming together and sharing that is incredibly helpful for everybody. Thanks to everybody that joined us to learn more about short-eared owls, whether you're a researcher, a rehabber, an educator, the general public. It's awesome to have more people learning, and especially thank you to everybody that made a donation to help support this series so we can keep it free so everybody can be learning more. And thanks to our moderators and Tristan over in YouTube for helping out over on that end. Kind of behind the scenes, it takes a small army to put these on. This is our last webinar of this winter. So we mostly just do these in winter when We're not doing as much stuff outside, and now we need to focus on here at the Owl Center, focus on our International Festival of Owls, which is the first weekend in March. Some of you may know about this, but we present the World Owl Hall of Fame Awards to awesome people from all over the world dedicating their lives to owls. This year, if you haven't heard yet, Marianne Savelsberg from the Netherlands is receiving a Special Achievement Award for her work with Eurasian eagle owl vocalizations. She'll be coming and speaking at our festival in March. Flacco, the Eurasian eagle owl, which I assume most of you heard about in the last few years, a captive Eurasian eagle owl at the Central Park Zoo that some vandals set loose, and he wound up living for a year free in Central Park. He's going to be receiving our Owl Award, and David Lay and Jackie Emery are going to be coming and speaking about him. And then our other award winner, Alan Saradsky, he's been just kind of had his fingers in, the outdoor end of things and the indoor end of things over the past 50 years. He's not able to come in person, but you can read about him on the festival website under our Hall of Fame thing. If you want to find out about future webinars that we're doing, we kind of do these in the winter. If you're not already on the Owl Center's e-newsletter list, you can go to the internationalowlcenter.org, our website. There should either be a pop-up box or a yellow tab on the side where you can sign up for. We have 2 separate e-newsletter lists. One is kind of like everything, and one is specific more to the research types of things. And these announcements come out on both of those lists. So if you want to make sure you're staying informed about what's coming up in the future, that's the best way to do it. So until next year, we'll see you back here, and then do check out the saved recordings too, because there's so much information there. It's a great way to spend some time instead of doom scrolling on the internet, actually learning stuff from experts out there in the field. So Alex and Andy, thanks a ton for this. Any last final parting words?
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us on. This is such a
You guys are fun. All right. So till next time, have a great rest of your day. And if you're going to watch the big game, you have time to do that yet. So have a great rest of your day.